Welcome back to Off Ball Takes. This is your host, Yarby Laws, and this is my co-host.
For Wells.
We recently did a live stream regarding the major trade news. I'm sure everybody knows what the heck I'm talking about. So shout out to everyone who showed out. We appreciate all the recent support and viewership on our content. And before we do get started, please don't forget to like and subscribe and follow us on Instagram and TikTok at the OBT Podcast for more content and updates.
Yes, so now time to talk about that specific trade that we just did a live stream on. What the heck? The Los Angeles Lakers and the Dallas Mavericks have engaged in a trade, sending LUKA DONCIC, right, who just went to the NBA Finals a year ago, to the Lakers for Anthony Davis. Now, obviously, you can mention the other names in there too, right? The Lakers are going to get LUKA DONCIC, Maxi Kleber, and Markieff Morris from the Mavericks. The Mavs will get Anthony Davis, Max Christie, and the Lakers' 2029 first-round pick. And then the Utah Jazz, who somehow got into this deal, got the Lakers' former first-round pick, Jalen Hood-Schifino, as well as a 2025 second-round pick from the Clippers and a 2025 second-round pick from the Mavs. I don't know why the Mavs put a second in there, but they did. So, just kind of wild, right? Because of the fact that, I'm sure most people have had like a similar type of story in terms of their reaction, in terms of how they found out, right? We found out because we were getting ready, to call it a night. And then the trade happens, right? It's being reported initially, but it comes from Shams. Everybody thinks it's fake. Everybody thinks he got hacked. And then over time, over the next several minutes, right, then you had other people who cover the NBA confirm it, put it out there. He confirmed it to make sure everybody knows that it was 100, or in his words, 1,000% real. And it's kind of wild because, again, even, less than 24 hours after it's happened, it's still kind of just wild to process, just from the perspective of, again, when we were talking about the Lakers, right, obviously, they had just gotten a win against the New York Knicks, right? AD's hurt, so he's been out for a little bit, but not too long. Max Christie started in that game. He plays well, and you're kind of thinking, all right, they're the 5th seed, and so maybe they make some moves to kind of try to improve the roster, maybe go all in on one last run with LeBron and AD. But instead they go in a different direction, right? Now, we've kind of talked about it multiple times where the thought process should either be go all in or blow it up. But in this case, if you're the Lakers, you actually didn't have to do either one. You actually, in a way, kind of got the best case scenario where now it's just a retool, right? Where you basically get to reset because now you got LUKA DONCIC, who's a top 5 player, right, at worst. And now he can be your foundational piece for the future, right? Just as opposed to, let's say a year or so from now, LeBron's done, and then it's AD, and the rest of the roster, right? And it seems like, when you start hearing more about this trade and how it went down, and obviously there'll be more, I'm sure, that will be reported as things go along, right? Apparently, Nico Harrison, right, the GM for the Mavs, and Rob Pelinka, right, the vice president of basketball operations for the Lakers, right, they met. And this was when they played the Mavs, right, earlier in the season, right, about a month or so ago. And, they talked about it, and, the Mavs GM kind of brought it up in a way where Pelinka thought he was joking. He's trolling, like from the perspective of, hey, what if we did this crazy trade, where we send you this guy, we send you that guy. And, they just kind of brush it off and it's a funny thing, right? But then it becomes a real scenario, right? He approached the team governor for the Mavs, right? And he laughs it off, right? Or laughs at it and just like, because who would have thought initially about moving LUKA for AD?
Mm-hmm.
And then, it continues to grow, it continues to happen, but nobody knows, right? This stuff was being reported as it was happening, and that's the wild part, is that none of the stars knew, right? LUKA didn't know. Apparently he didn't ask to be traded. LeBron didn't know, and AD didn't know. But, when you kind of look at it from that perspective, this is the craziest trade ever, at least for the NBA. I mean, probably in sports history as well, just from the perspective of no one saw this coming. And for the Lakers, right, it keeps up the tradition of being able to acquire some type of star, right? Because they've had over the last several decades some type of star foundational piece, right? Whether it's Jerry West and Elgin Baylor, right? Or, you add Wilt Chamberlain, you get Kareem, you get Magic, you get Shaq Kobe, LeBron AD, now LUKA, right? You just go down the line. And, I guess the question is, I understand perfectly why the Lakers would do it. Because, again, you're getting a younger star who can be your foundational piece. My question is, why, if you're the Dallas Mavericks, do you consider doing this? And you can make the case that, like, all right, you got AD.
Mm-hmm.
The GM says defense wins titles. We're a defensive team. They've got
Mm-hmm.
a ton of size. You
Mm-hmm.
still have Kyrie, you have AD, and whatever other pieces.
Sure.
But you just went to the finals. And I just feel like with Luka as your best player, you just had a higher ceiling. And it just feels like you never trade your best player usually and get better. Now, in fairness, you're not trading him for draft picks and random contracts. You are getting back a top 10 player. It's just now you're older, right? And you fast forward a few years from now, can this, core theoretically compete for the title? Maybe, but probably not. And that's kind of the issue there, right? Where you have Kyrie and AD, those guys for the most part have been their best as number twos, or at
Right.
the very least 1A, 1B, something like that, right? They're not really number ones ideally. And that's kind of where it just doesn't make a lot of sense. And from the Maverick side, there's been a lot of reporting about the idea of, well, Luka, they're concerned about his conditioning. They didn't want to pay him a super max, right? Possibly 345 million for 5 years. And yeah, it's a lot of money, but it's still Luka Doncic, right? Like in theory, you kind of just have to work with that, right? Even like a Jokic, right? At a different point in his career, people had concerns about his conditioning. And they still believed in him. And he worked through that. And then even with Zion, right? Like obviously his contract has all these, caveats to it,
Sure.
but I mean they didn't trade him, when they were, because I mean those conditioning issues for Zion were apparent even when he was a rookie. So that's kind of it's something where it just doesn't make a lot of sense. And like even from a Laker perspective, it's like how do you end up being able to pull off something like this, right? Like say if you're Rob Pelinka, I mean, like you basically went from everybody saying like this guy has no idea what he's doing. He's basically ruined, the last stretch of LeBron's career and AD's career or whatever. To now all of a sudden he gets a reset. He gets a pass. He gets a gold medal, gold star basically, for what he was able to do. And now we have to kind of see what both teams do, because there are reports from people, multiple sources, right, that where they don't believe that either team is done making moves, right. So we'll see what the Mavs do in terms of what else they can put together around these guys. AD presumably now goes back to the four, right. Apparently, that was a problem with the Lakers where he said he wanted to play more four, and they had an issue with that. So they said, all right, you can play the four, but not here. So which is just kind of wild,
Yeah.
but. I guess it just goes back to the Laker brand where it's their brand, over the stars. And I guess, stars will, for whatever, will want to go there, for however long. And it's just kind of wild where now you have a new guy that comes in at some point. We'll see if other guys will come join Luka in LA. Because presumably after LeBron, you're going to have some cap space. You're going to have pieces that you can move. We'll see. But then obviously also at the deadline, now you got Luka and LeBron playing together, right? So how's that going to look, um, from, like a team building perspective? What pieces are they going to go after? You can't really have Jackson Hayes as your starting center full time if you want to be competitive. So what moves do they pull off? They still have a first left. Surprisingly, they didn't have to give up both firsts or all the remaining firsts. They didn't have to give up Austin Reeves. Didn't have to give up Dalton Connect. They did lose Max Christie, right, as a 3-and-D guy, but I mean it is Luka. So it's like, you can't feel bad about giving up, certain pieces if you're going to get Luka Doncic. So that's where I'm just incredibly curious, just where both of these teams go from here. And then again, like just with the Mavs, it just seems like they've just set fire and just kind of burned the bridge with Luka. I know he put out a statement where he was, very grateful to the fans and the players and the coaches, but there wasn't really a whole lot of talk about, the organization necessarily. Because again, they were just putting out a bunch of stories where they're like, yeah, he's out of shape, and we just don't believe he's gonna be, worth giving all that money to. Maybe you can make that case, but you just feel like normally this is something that you do. Could it be a result of the new CBA? Could it be a result of a change in ownership, right? Because
Mm.
Mark Cuban doesn't own the Mavs anymore, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
he gave up his ownership share, and I don't think he even really controls the team either, right? I think he ended up not doing that, which was different than what was initially reported. So just, the Lakers, it was odd because we were thinking initially that they may not do a big move at the deadline and just kind of just ride it out with LeBron and AD. And then LeBron retires, AD still there. Maybe they move him for pieces. And then it looks like you're going to be headed for like a rough rebuild. but now you get to reset and retool because you just got, an MVP level guy who's not even in his prime yet. He's only 25. So, I mean, for the Lakers, I mean, they pretty much get about as high of a grade as you can get because you got back Luka Doncic, which is not a name at all that we would have expected them to get at the deadline. And, for the Mavs, I don't know. It's hard to give them a great grade because you gave up Luka. I mean, you get back a good return. It's not like you didn't get bums. You got Anthony Davis, who's a top 10 guy. You got a nice young guy in Max Christie. It's just you just don't do this in terms of teams never deal their young stars away. I mean, it would be like if the Pistons were like, let's trade Cade Cunningham. Obviously, different stage, right? But just in terms of, or like if the Spurs traded Wemby or something like that, right? Or if like
Yeah.
the Nuggets traded Jokic a few years back, right? It just doesn't make a lot of sense, from that perspective. And I don't know. And like even from a trade perspective, you would think if you're even thinking about trading Luka, you're not gonna, field offers. You're not gonna like, put it out like, hey, if anybody's interested in trading for Luka, give us your best offers. Then we'll kind of thumb through it and see which one's the best one, and we'll go from there. No, it's just like they wanted Anthony Davis specifically. He's in LA, so we send him to LA. So I don't know. As a Laker fan, I'm just kind of blown away by it. Obviously, it sucks to see AD leave, because he was a great, player and teammate, and a good, ambassador for the organization. But it is also Luka, so you can only complain but so much just because of the fact that you have a foundational piece post LeBron, and obviously that would have been a big concern, after those guys are gone, because then you're kind of back in the gutter, and now you're not. Now you kind of have a get out of jail free card.
Yeah, I don't even know where to start. First of all, please go check out our live stream because that is our real raw thoughts, minutes after the news had broken. And these are obviously our marinated thoughts, but yeah, holy crap. I think, if you're the Lakers, you should be loving every second of this. This is clearly a future move, like I don't think people are really going to care if they don't win the chip this year or the next. I think we're looking 2027 and beyond because I think, there's going to be a couple of guys who will be free agents, and we already know that LeBron will probably be out of the league in 2 years, free up a ton of cap like you were talking about, and you bring in that, big name free agent that'll pair up with Luka Doncic. So I think that's, what the long game that the Lakers are playing, and you get your franchise guy or another one, in Luka, and it's just crazy that we're even talking about this at the moment.
Right.
And that's the crazy part. And yeah, like I said,
It's
I
like,
think if you're a Laker fan, I just don't understand how you could possibly hate it on it. And I've seen, the
right.
overall sentiment is, yeah, holy crap, how did we do this? I think it's the fleece of the year, like you said, highest grade possible, A plus. You didn't have to give up multiple first round picks. Obviously, you had to give up Anthony Davis, who's a great player, different caliber and a different, kind of player as well. But Luka, I think, was in that upper echelon tier where you kind of
Yeah.
considered him untouchable before this trade, in
Mhm.
the likes of like Jokic or Shea. Like, there's just
Yeah.
Giannis even, like, there's just that certain group of guys that you never want to let go. And I just, for the life of me, won't and will never agree with what Dallas did. I understand the
Right.
logic, right? Nobody's saying that it's bad logic or it's flawed. I think everybody understands the thought process, but I don't think everybody agrees with it. In my
Right.
opinion, it's dumb. And like you said, I think you said it the best. Where I don't agree with the execution at all.
Mhm.
What I would have done is all out bidding war. Put it out just like how we've been getting the rumors about Fox for weeks, Jimmy Butler for
Mhm.
months. Put it out there, increase the guy's value. Because say
Mhm.
you get another offer that you can't turn down that's 10 times better than AD and a first round pick and Max Christie or whatever, right? So like, what if it's multiple firsts, a
Mhm.
star of equal or a star that might have been even better than Anthony Davis? That's where
Mhm.
I just don't understand the logic. Why is it a one-on-one behind the scenes inner working under the wraps trade? Like it came out of nowhere. There were no rumors to this except going back to the summer, but I thought that was more like they're going to chase after
Right.
him in free agency. I just don't
Right.
understand where this came from. Came from left field. Not complaining that it happened. I'm just baffled still almost 24 hours later. And I mean, if you're the Mavs, I think this is a mistake, a huge mistake. The guy is 25. It's not like he's 30. It's not like he's, it's not like it's going to be a different version of Luka Doncic unless they're
Right.
withholding something medically, which isn't even legal, I don't think.
Right.
That would be the only saving grace is like they know that Luka's never going to return to form, so he's out of there. But I just don't believe that that's the case.
Right.
And I like I said, I'm really at a loss for words. I think the identity of the Dallas Mavericks is pretty solid. Nobody's arguing against a great defensive, lineup defensive team, but we got to keep it real. How many more years can that team contend? Like obviously they're going to be a contender this year, which is why you can't give the grade an F, or the trade an F, because I think at the very least you're still a contender because of your defense, and you still have Anthony Davis, who we know can be an even bigger threat offensively at the 4. But regardless, you gave up the franchise guy for a guy who's 31, 32, going to be 32 in a couple of weeks or something like that. So like that's what I just don't understand, the upside that you're kind of bringing in terms of even the long game, even the short game. Like either way, I just don't like it because you're giving up a 25-year-old superstar, top 5, top 3 player for Anthony Davis. Doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me, and didn't field any offers.
Yeah, and the worst case scenario if you're the Mavs is like a scenario where he hears all the stories where everybody's been talking about, him being out of shape and that you're not worth a supermax deal. And that's the other part, that the Lakers won't have to give him a supermax, right? They don't have to give him 45. They give him, the 295 or whatever. So basically like 100. I think it's like somewhere around a $100 million difference. It may be 395. I don't remember the exact number, but either way, it's a massive difference in terms of what the Lakers have to pay. They can't give him, that amount, which would have been like 70+ million a year.
They gift wrapped it. I just don't understand how the Dallas Mavericks gift wrapped Luka Doncic, and it's not like it was a generational haul. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like I could understand. All right, you're giving up all the first round picks, kind of like what happened with New Orleans, like you were talking about on live stream last night. I could understand a deal like that. I think that's like a Godfather offer. All right, amazing. Like you cannot turn that down. Like that's a perfect way to accelerate your rebuild. This is dog crap, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah, if it was like AD, Austin, Max, all the firsts, whatever, I guess they can only really trade 2 right now. But like also pick swaps, you can do that too.
Right.
Seconds, but no, they didn't have to do that. And they even moved on from JHS.
Yeah, right. And that's the other thing. What do we grade Utah's grade or whatever? What do we give them?
I mean, honestly, I think you got to give him a pretty good. I think you might as well give him an A because I mean, you factor in that like you get a point guard.
Yeah.
We'll see if he's any good. Now he doesn't have his team option anymore, so he'll be a free agent after this season. So it's like you get like a trial run of him for a couple months. Now he's been hurt, so he may not even really play.
Right.
But you also get seconds. You got a second from Dallas.
Yeah.
And I think they got the Clippers second, which came from the Lakers. So you got a couple seconds for being in the deal, which, again, that's wild.
Yeah.
That they were even in the deal to begin with. Because Jake Fisher reported that the Mavs were trying to get a third team in the deal. And so people knew that the Mavs and the Lakers were doing something. But what they didn't know that it was going to be AD and LUKA.
People probably thought it was Gafford or something,
Right. Yeah, because remember, there were rumors about like the Mavs were possibly looking for a center because they just lost Lively for, a little bit. So that's where you kind of wonder, okay, could Gafford still be on the move? PJ Washington, is he a bench guy now? Like, so it's Kyrie and Clay and AD. That's interesting. But, that's kind of where there's still a lot of questions. But, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, if you're the Lakers, you got Luka. And, you're basically set for the next several years now where, obviously, again, we'll see what it looks like in terms of Luka and LeBron right now, right? And then see if they do anything else at the deadline, only a few days left. See if they get a center, see if they, try to make some type of run. I'm assuming, if they're gonna do this, then they might
Oh
as well
yeah,
just
yeah,
do that. 'Cause
yeah.
now you have Luka, so you're not really, because now their late first rounds don't mean as much anymore because you have Luka. So like as long
That's
as you have him plus stuff, you should be good every year. Unless he has some bad injury, right? And that
right.
I guess would be one concern if can he hold up, but
But
uh,
not AD level, which is good.
right.
You know,
Yeah, and like AD's been healthier the last couple of seasons.
agreed.
It's just now he's 32, so presumably, like 5 years from now, what does he look like, right? He'll be 36, 37. And like with the Mavs, you don't have a long window, right? And those guys aren't going to be better. Like they're both really good, but like with Kyrie, he's 32 now. He's had some back issues this season, right? And then,
Yeah,
obviously AD's been healthy these last couple of seasons, which is great. But again, you don't have, 7 years the way that you had with Luca, and I know 7 sounds like a random number. I'm just saying like you had a long time with Luca. The window was open, but now for the Mavs, it feels like it's closed. And the Mavs fans, right? If you want to know, how people feel about how the Mavs fans feel about it. I mean, like they seem like they're devastated because I mean that's their franchise guy.
yeah.
He just went to the finals last year, and like they tend to defend him a lot. When people kind of say like, yeah, he'll never win with that style of play. He doesn't stay in shape. They love him,
Yeah,
right? And
and
he
he
loved
loves
them
them back.
too.
Exactly. It makes
Exactly.
no
So
sense, bro.
right. So that's where I don't understand what's going on. Like, is it the ownership change? I don't know. So it's like,
What did you make of the press conference that
yeah,
that the general manager and Jason Kidd held? That
right.
Kidd looked like,
Yeah.
why am I here? And the general
Exactly. Yeah.
manager looked like he had tons of regret. Like I could just hear it in his
Right, yeah.
voice.
I mean,
What?
it's wild because he mentioned a handful of things in that presser where like and he admitted it, right? He admitted like when I told Rob Pelinka this, like he thought I was trolling. He thought I was kidding.
Right.
Even also mentioned that when he brought it up to the team governor, right? He laughed at him when he brought the trade up, right? So and then he admitted it publicly, right? And then he also mentioned, yeah, Luca didn't want to leave and didn't say he wouldn't resign because some people might have thought, oh, well, maybe he wasn't going to resign. So, like, you move him, and get out of it. Because he mentioned, like, that there was going to be possibly some tumultuous stuff going on. So we move him. I don't know, maybe. And then he also mentioned the idea of, like, well, 10 years from now, Jason Kidd and I probably won't even be here. And so it's like,
Dude,
okay, that's
I'm
odd.
telling
And
you,
I
he
mean,
looks so out of it.
it's funny because, he has done a pretty good job with the Mavs, right? Like, I mean, you
Hmm.
factor in he did the Kyrie deal, back when everybody kind of thought, what is this? Like, I mean, a lot of people were kind of, thinking like, hey, that pairing's not going to work. You're not going to win with that, right? And, they had a bad first year together. Then, they make the moves at the deadline where they get PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford, and everybody's like, does that really move the needle that much? And they went to the finals with those guys. Then in this past summer, they make moves where most people felt like they got better. And, obviously they've had some bad luck with injuries, but you just kind of thought, well, let's just see what happens when everybody gets healthy. Maybe they make some moves to kind of switch a couple guys around, but not at all did you think like the ship was on, fire and we have to basically, kind of just jump ship and abandon the Luka thing. Because
Right.
we talked about it, I remember the summer after they got Luka and Kyrie, or after they got Kyrie, where we said something along the lines of like, yeah, if this doesn't work out, they might move Kyrie, and then Luka might get upset, and then they might move him, and then they went to the finals, and then a year from that, now Luka's the one that's not even a Mav.
Right.
So that's the part that just seems kind of insane. Where I just kind of wonder, like, what's going on? Like, just in terms of, like, it just seems like such a surprise. But yeah, the press conference, that was bizarre. And then when you look at the Mavs players, they're like, "What?" Like, they seem like they had, that they were all shocked by the fact that it happened. They asked PJ Washington about it. He seemed like, he kind of tried to give the PR answer of like, well, we got AD, he's really good, but they even mentioned, like, yeah, that Luca's my brother and stuff like that.
Yeah,
He's our guy. So it doesn't seem right. It just seems like, you know, what the heck is going on here? I don't understand it, like I said, from a Mavs
hmm,
perspective. But from a Laker perspective, again, if you're Rob Pelinka, I mean, you're over the moon at this point. Like,
yeah,
the moon's not haunting you in this scenario. Like, you are just excited just at the fact that, like, you have a guy you can build around for the next several years, and we'll see what happens. But I mean, I'm sure he'll fit in just fine, right? Obviously,
Yeah.
he's played in high pressure games before. Obviously, the LA spotlight is different, but I think he's built for this type of stuff. So no real concerns there. It's just a matter of obviously, can he continue to be healthy? Could he have like that giant middle finger where again, he kind of gets into real shape and then it looks even worse for the Mavs. Obviously they'll actually be playing each other, right? Because they've only played each other once.
Right.
And that
Right.
was the game where Luka didn't even play. Because he's been hurt, right? And the Mavs blew out the Lakers, and like I said, that's when the trade talks started. But just a crazy trade. I mean, you can't. This is the type of thing that you would pull off in a video game, like in
Mm-hmm.
2K, and
Mm-hmm.
like you can't even do it in 2K unless you cheat, and do like the trade override system. It won't let you,
Yeah. That's how
necessarily,
dumb it
right?
is from the Mavericks' perspective, I think.
Yeah, because like Luca in the game is one of those untouchable players. Like, they have certain players that the teams kind of mark as untouchable. And he's one of those guys. Like you said, if you built like a trade value ranking or pyramid, he'd be in easily one of the, top 5 guys in
Yeah.
there where
Top three.
you're thinking that's a guy that's never getting traded unless he wants to.
Yep.
They're not that they would just trade him just to like, oh, well, we're done. It's kind of wild. So I think
Yeah.
that's, kind of the thing that we're looking at it from the Mavs perspective, but from the Lakers perspective, how does this change, or how does this, does this change their approach? I guess it does, but what should they do for this trade deadline? Because like from the Mavs perspective, yeah, they said they're not done. And I guess we can talk about them too, but from the Lakers side, since they got Luka, what should they look to do at the deadline?
Well, I think big man. I would say big man, but yeah, I would say big man ranks at top prio. And number two would probably be some other defensive guys. I mean, it's pretty nice that you have Finney Smith, but I think you need a little bit more on that end. So I'm not sure who gets dealt and what gets dealt. Like maybe you get rid of Rui. Do you really need a guy like Rui on the floor? I
Right.
don't know. Maybe that can turn into a big man or something like that. That would kind of be intriguing, but I don't know what they do beyond the big man. Like I want them to get some defensive specialists, especially at the guard position, but I just don't know who's
Right.
available and who's gonna have to go out in order to get that, assuming that they are still chasing
Yeah.
after a big man. Because what Christian Wood is hurt still. Um,
Yeah.
Jackson Hayes, yeah, I don't think he's gonna be a good starting center.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, and that's the thing where it's like you said, they have pieces that they could potentially move. Now, Maxi Kleba came over in the deal, but obviously with the trade rules, you can't aggregate him in a move. He'd
Mhm.
have to be in a move by himself, so he could just be stuck there. But he also has the broken foot, so he's not really going to be able to play.
Right,
So that's kind of that could be something you just do in the summer because
right,
there's no one deal that is going to fix and solve everything. It's just more so do what you can, use whatever remaining pieces you have left
right.
to, see if you can put together something. And then even if it doesn't work, LeBron, even if he retires in like a year or two from now, you got Luka. So then it's not as big of a deal as it would have been before.
Right. Yeah.
And then
I
from the
agree.
Mavs perspective, yeah, and then from the Mavs perspective, what should they be looking for at the deadline? Because obviously you lost Luca, so now you lose some more perimeter shot creation and ball handling. Now it's kind of just Kyrie Irving and Spencer Dinwiddie, maybe Jaden Hardy off the bench, but his role's been a little bit different. But what should they be looking for?
Make that call to New Orleans. I would say go after a guy like Brandon Ingram. You
Okay.
know, assemble a new big three. I think that they could make that work in terms of the money and the financials. I'm sure. But yeah, I would say go after a star. I don't think Jimmy Butler fits the mold. I wouldn't really like that. I would definitely prioritize a guy like Brandon Ingram over Jimmy Butler at this point, just because I think he can bring a little bit more offensively to the game.
Mhm.
And I wouldn't really mind a trio of Kyrie, Brandon Ingram, and Anthony Davis, because I think the defensive
Right.
upside is still going to be there from the surrounding guys. Just depends on who
Mhm.
you give up, but I think that would be my number one target. Chase after another guy that brings in some offense.
Yeah, I think that's honestly that's a good idea, and just he's not Luca, but if you can kind of find a guy that's got some level of shot creation ability, then that probably would be good.
Yeah.
From the perspective of you need an additional guy other than Kyrie as a
Yes.
ball handler, just
Yes.
because you can't really just have him. I think he'd probably wear down.
Yeah.
Um, you know, as you get deeper into the playoffs, because we kind of even saw that, by the time they got to the Celtics series, the Celtics kind of wore him out,
And
and
that's
they
another
have,
thing. Sorry to cut
yep,
you off because I think this is important. Um,
hmm
I think we might have forgotten and looked over the fact that Kyrie is a very volatile person, or he has been in the past. Volatile player, very unpredictable. He could mess
hmm
everything up and just not come back, right? I'm pretty sure, right? Like that's possible because he could decline. He has, I think, for his contract, what is it? He can decline something and he'll be like a free agent, something like that.
yeah, I think he's got a player option next season,
Yeah,
so he's
so
got
he could.
41 million this year, so
Yeah,
then and then a $43 million player option.
yeah. So he could just up and leave at some point, and I think that's something that's intriguing because what if things just don't go right and he wants out and he just leaves? That now I
hmm
think the trade looks even worse because then what does your future look like from the Mavericks perspective beyond Kyrie? I don't know. That's why I think they
Yeah.
need to go out and get a star just in case too.
Right, exactly. So, and that's kind of how you look at it. And then, like offensively, Kyrie AD. I mean, again, we already talked about the upgrades they can make there, but guard big, pick and roll. So that makes a lot of sense. I guess it'd be an upgrade from say like a D'Angelo Russell offensively. So, he knows how to play with those type of guys. So
Heck
that's
yeah.
probably fine. Defensively, you got a ton of size and versatility. Then from the Lakers perspective, like Luka, LeBron, obviously that's very different because those are two guys that have the ball in their hands a lot. I think those guys will probably figure out how to play alongside one another. Both guys now are pretty solid 3-point shooters, so I think you're not really too worried there. I think the main question would probably be how do you figure out the defense?
Mm.
Just because now obviously LeBron at this point in his career can't give you the consistent level of defensive consistency from before. And then Luca was not really known much for defense anyways. So that's kind of where like you mentioned, you have to kind of go out and see if you can get the big, I guess to replace Anthony Davis,
Yeah,
if you can
right.
even do that.
Right.
And then kind of figure, you have some wings, so I guess that's nice. Like you got Vanderbilt, you got Dorian
Yeah.
Finney-Smith. Um, I guess we'll see what they do with Rui because, like you said, that's probably the guy you have to move to get the big, unless it's a really cheap big, right? Then maybe you use like a Gabe Vincent. Austin Reeves, what do you do with him? Is he just going to be in the backcourt next to Austin? Is he or next to Luca? Is he a backup? Is he gonna get moved? What do you kind of do with that? Because I guess if you keep him, then that's a solid offensive trio, I suppose. Because Austin's had a really good year. Playing next to LeBron essentially as the point guard post D'Lo trade.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if I was the Lakers, I would target say a guy like Walker Kessler for the big. Um and then from there yeah, that's the tough part cuz I know previously they've kind of not labeled Austin Reeves as untouchable, but they've kind of treated him almost like he's not allowed to
Yeah,
be brought up in trade talks,
like
multiple
like
deals
a
have been
star,
exactly.
except for Luca.
Right.
So
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Hey, it is what it is. But that's kind of what I think is curious about, or yeah, curious about it because I
Mhm.
think I would probably keep Austin over Rui. I think I would feel better about having those defensive wings and defensive forwards and stuff like that. Over a guy like Rui because you're getting I think a crap ton from Luca already, and then LeBron
yeah,
I think can provide some pretty good stuff on offense as well. So offensively, I don't think that's an issue. Maybe in terms of how it looks and works, but I think that
mhm,
the end game result will be fine. But it's
yeah,
really the defensive stuff that's hurting because I think we all know Austin Reeves, okay defender, definitely not the
mhm,
best.
yeah,
There's better out there, and I think there might be a way that you could pull something off to grab a couple of defenders, but I don't know. I just feel like he might have to stay, and that
mhm,
might be something that they have to address over the
mhm.
summer or the next year or something like that. But I don't
Right,
know because who's really that's my thing. I don't really know who's like super available. Well, I guess now
right.
because I don't even think this whole Luka Doncic trade even sets the precedent of everybody's available. I just think this is just an anomaly.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's the thing, like, and also like with because like with Austin, like you wouldn't have given him up for the other guys that they possibly could have given him up for, but then you'd give him up for like a center, and it's not like one of the best centers in the league. Yeah, that's kind of the thing where I think you're right. Where I think for at least for this season, he's probably still going to be, a Laker, and then they just kind of figure out the other pieces on the margins, and then
Yeah.
they just kind of go from there. I
Yeah.
think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So, well,
What a
I
doozy.
mean, yeah. Do we have any other thoughts? I suppose, on this, because just because again, this is something that just doesn't normally happen.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's the biggest trade of our lifetimes. Heck,
Hmm.
might even be all time, like you said, might even be sports all time because there's just some players across all sports that you just don't trade. And I think Luka was one of them. And I think that's why everybody's kind of shocked. But there is a general consensus of the Mavs really freaking messed up. Um,
Hmm.
Nobody really likes or agrees with what Dallas has put forward and what they did, and the rationale doesn't really help either. Like I said, the press
Hmm.
conference didn't help the situation, and the backlash. It's been a PR nightmare. So, but that's kind of what you expect when something like
Yeah.
this happens, and it's really not a 1-for-1. It's not even close.
Yeah. And it's funny because we hadn't even thought about it. I hadn't even thought about it
Hmm.
until recently, right? Like, remember this? Now it's, I guess, different ownership. Remember, they had let Jalen Brunson just walk. They let him walk to New York. So you lost Brunson
Holy
and you
crap!
lost Luca.
Wow,
And now you got Kyrie and AD, which is still good, but I mean, it's like,
it's not
I don't
generational.
know. Yeah, I mean, that's just kind of a wild situation,
Yeah,
to think about. And it's funny because again, across the league, everybody, I mean, they even asked players about it, and they're like, they're all like, "What?"
you
Because
saw the
I mean,
tweets. You
how,
saw the tweets. They were
yeah,
crazy.
exactly. Like, I mean, how else can you really react to it? I mean, there's nobody that's gonna be like, "Yeah, that doesn't really surprise me."
There was
Of course. So I
there was
mean,
somebody I saw somewhere on Twitter. It was like Devin Booker. There was like a fan interaction between him and Devin
yeah,
Booker, and like they were like, yeah, they just traded Luca, and then Devin Booker's like, ooh, Luca Garza, like not Luca Doncic, right?
right.
No, we're talking about Doncic, bro. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's yeah, and it's just wild. And again, you even got like a Markieff Morris reunion.
Right,
He
right,
goes back to the Lakers where he won a title. So
right.
I mean, Max Kleba, I think him and Luca are pretty close. So I guess they,
Yeah.
head to LA together. So just a lot of different pieces in this, and again,
Ooh.
even Utah getting involved. So
Yeah, shout out to Utah. They're underrated in this deal. Like, I think it's a good thing to have your hand in the mix here.
yeah. Now you would think it would stop there,
Right, right.
but it didn't because less than an hour before we got on, we had another trade that happened. So this is less than 24 hours from the Luca AD trade, and we got this one's less shocking, but still a big deal. And it's De'Aaron Fox finally landing in San Antonio, in a 3-team deal, right? So you got De'Aaron Fox going to the San Antonio Spurs along with Jordan McLaughlin. The Sacramento Kings are in this deal. They get Zach LaVine from the Chicago Bulls, right? So it's a 3-team deal from the Spurs, the Kings, and the Bulls. The Kings get Zach LaVine, CD Sissoko's from the Spurs, 3 first-round picks, 2025 Hornets pick, 2027 Spurs pick, 2031 Timberwolves pick, right? So I think that's all from the Spurs, and if I'm not mistaken, I think the Wolves pick may be from the Bulls, but I don't think it is.
Right.
And then the Bulls get Zach Collins, Trey Jones, Kevin Herter, and then they get their own first round pick back from the Spurs. So, from the Spurs perspective, this is a home run because you got De'Aaron Fox and you gave up nothing, essentially. You just picks. I mean, you gave up some role players, right? Like you gave up Sissoko, you gave up Zach Collins, you gave up
Way to
Trey
get off
Jones.
that contract, by the way.
Exactly. Right. So you didn't even have to give up any of your young guys, right? So they stood their ground and they were able to, keep Stephon Castle, keep Devin Vassell, and now you just add Fox to that core, right? So, now you got Fox, Castle, Wemby, right? Those are 3 guys, and you still have Vassell, 4, right? And then, you kind of figure out the rest from there, right? Like, is it still Sohan, Harrison Barnes, Chris Paul, I guess now is the backup, which is, better than having Trey Jones as the
Yes.
backup. So that's a team where we talked about it, where that could be a team where not that you expect them to be a title team or anything, But certainly, now you have to move them up a peg where they could possibly start winning some games, and that might push some of these teams that are still hanging around, not bad, right? But now they better start winning some games so that way the Spurs don't catch up to them, right? Because the Spurs have been struggling. They're 3-7 in their last 10, but they just got De'Aaron Fox
Well,
for
that's about
free,
to change.
basically,
Yeah,
right?
it's
So
about to change.
yeah, so now you have a star perimeter guard playing alongside Wemby. And some of these teams are also going to have to play the Spurs too. So that like the Warriors will have to play them again. I believe the Kings, and the Suns and the Mavs, they'll all have to play them again. And so, you better hope that you're ready when you play that team, because that team is going to look better. Um, because now you have, basically an all NBA level guard playing next to Wemby. So now you have the guy on offense that can handle the ball, get his own offense as well, and kind of use, not like the best passing point guard in the world, but he's certainly capable of making those type of plays.
Hmm.
Obviously super fast, super competitive, right? The fact that he wanted to go to the Spurs, I mean, that's a big deal, right? It's not automatically, like I want to go to a championship contender. So I think that's awesome. So I think that's a perfect type of guy, to have in that environment.
Yeah.
So for the Spurs, it's a home run, and again, he gets to play and grow with all those young guys. Gets out of Sacramento, where now you're kind of wondering, like, all right, what's going on with them, right? Because now, you had Halliburton, you moved him and chose Fox over him. Now you don't have either. Now you have Zach LaVine, and you even have DeRozan, right? Who they had just played in Chicago together not that long ago, right? So now you got, I guess, Malik Monk is your point guard, Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, Keegan Murray, and Sabonis. Like, okay, I mean, I guess you could win some games, but I would think your floor, your ceiling would be lower because you just gave up Fox, even though LaVine is great. And it's funny because they wanted him, right? Because we were talking about that like a year or so ago. The idea of rumors about the Kings really being interested in LaVine. So it weird. And then Chicago, what are we doing? What are we doing? Because I mean, like, yes, you traded LaVine,
Hmm.
but what did you really get back? I mean, I guess it's like some picks, but I mean,
Hmm.
like, I feel like the return. I mean, you got basically one first. I mean,
Hmm.
that seems kind of and then bad contracts. I mean, like, I mean, I guess in fairness, I know Levine's not considered like a top level star, right? Like, you're not getting back, you know, the typical superstar return for Levine. It just feels like we said that they should have moved on from these guys years ago, and now they finally do. But it's going to be for returns where it's not a whole lot. Although, in
Sure.
fairness, people were saying that had they moved them last year, they would have gotten back possibly even less. But it's like, you know, is it really much worse?
Hmm.
Like, I mean, would it have really been that much worse? I mean, I guess possibly, but I mean, like, I think I'd rather have like Andrew Wiggins and then the expiring Chris Paul contract and maybe some first or something. Then, I guess you get your own first back, so that's nice, but
Yeah.
it feels a little bit disappointing,
Really?
from
That's
that
interesting.
perspective. I mean, not that it's bad.
Hmm.
It's just like it just feels kind of weird. But I also understand like you probably weren't getting a ton back for Levine, but it felt like he had played so well that you were gonna get more.
Right.
But like I said, I also understand that thought process. But it feels like the last few deals they've made, it felt like with Caruso, like you could have gotten multiple firsts. Instead, you get Josh Giddey, and like Giddey's fine, right? Like it's nowhere near as awful as like if you got nothing. But still, it seems like they just seem like they kind of just doing whatever. But
Mm.
either way, they had to move on from some of these guys because there was no point in keeping Levine in Chicago. There was no like you weren't going anywhere.
Hmm.
I mean, I guess it's more so just the question of like, they probably still would have lost even with him being on the roster. So you could have had a lottery pick to add to it, but he has no real reason to be on this type of team. It's just my question is, does he have a real reason to be on Sacramento? I mean, especially post the Aaron Fox, because when they talked about getting Levine first, you would have thought it would have been Fox with Levine as your backcourt, not just Levine and Sabonis. So that's the part where it seems kind of odd. So I think the Spurs for sure got the best of this deal. And then the Kings and Bulls, okay, but I think the main story is just the Spurs. Holy moly, they just got better and had to give up basically nothing.
Yeah, I think from San Antonio's perspective, you give them an A plus. This was for sure like a fleece. And I think it's amazing because you look at their core now. Yeah, it's De'Aaron Fox who's what 27. So and the beautiful thing is he's a veteran. Like he has experience, and I think that's gonna be amazing as well because you have a high level talent with experience who can kind of show the younger guys like a Stephon Castle. How this league really works. Not that he hasn't adapted great already, because I think everybody's high on him. But for
Hmm.
him to be there, Wemby, Vassell as well, like yeah, that's low key a sleeper core, and they're only going to get better, and they're only going to continue to build, and help bolster up that roster and the bench and stuff like that. So that's awesome. From the Kings' perspective, I think this is the one that I like the least. I'm going to be real. Um,
Hmm.
Zach LaVine has had a heck of a season, way to bounce back, and show people that you're worth the money. But at the end of the day, I don't like the fit. We've seen it before with DeRozan and Zach LaVine together in Chicago. Kind of just going to be rehashing old things. I guess you do have the added piece in Sabonis, which is good, I guess. But that big three, I just don't really have a whole lot of confidence in it. There's no real starting point guard. The only thing that I do like about it is you got Kevin Herter out of there because I don't think he was really doing that much for you. So way to move on from that, and I guess recoup a guy of similar monetary value and probably like one tier below De'Aaron Fox and Zach LaVine. So it's not like you lost out on the entire thing and you just didn't get anything back. So the
Hmm.
Kings do get another star, I guess. But from Chicago's perspective, I actually like it a lot. I think it's a commitment to being bad, which is something that they haven't done in a long time, if not ever. And take it from me, being a Wizards fan, I understand those years of mediocrity where you just get, the 14th or 13th pick in the NBA draft, and those guys don't really pan out to be a whole lot. So now you're committing to being bad. Um, like you said, I guess you get back your first round pick, but committing to being bad is so much better than just being mediocre or, shilling out all this money to just an average team that won't do anything. So I think it's better to be bad than average.
I guess my only question is like that pick was top 10 protected.
Mm,
So in theory, they could have just been bad enough to still keep it,
true.
you know? Like that's where I'm kind of confused as to like, well what's the point of that? Like they would, cuz like right now, I mean, where are they in the standings? I mean, they are 10th in the Eastern Conference. They're 21 and 29. So, if you look at them in the league, they are a bottom 10 team in the league.
Hmm.
So it's like, that's the part where, they're ninth right now. So and they're probably not going to climb. So that's where the part that I'm kind of confused. Because, like, I'm looking at it from the Kings where it's like, well, at least you got back somebody if you're going to move De'Aaron Fox. It's just like, and that's the part where, like, the Bulls, it's just kind of just odd. Just because I just feel like, it feels like you could have gotten more for Levine, like, than just, your own first, which you could have just gotten anyways. That's the part where it feels a little bit disappointing. But I guess the question is, now what do you do with the rest of the Bulls roster? Because presumably they shouldn't be done. Like they should be moving on from,
Hmm.
some of those other pieces, right? Like say like a Vucevic, right? That's a guy that in theory he should be headed out somewhere, right? He's got 2 years left on his deal. Apparently the Warriors were, according to Mark Stein, were could have possibly gotten Vucevic and Levine, and I guess they just said no for whatever
Hmm.
reason. Don't really
That's
know,
that's dumb.
yeah, I
I would
don't
have
really
taken
know
that in a
why.
heartbeat.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know what the deal would have been. I mean, I'd imagine it would have had you would have had to have probably had Wiggins in the deal, and then probably their other guys like a Peyton or something. I don't know, but like I would have done that. I mean,
Yeah,
I know
a
it would
heartbeat.
suck to lose Wiggins, but I mean, I would have liked Levine there, but I guess something kind of I know people are saying that they're going to do something, but like what's left for them at this point? I mean, I guess you could just get Vucevic, but how much better does that really like? It'll make them better, but like, does it make them better enough where like you're worried about them? Are you scared of them? Like, no, not really. And
Right.
then you might have thought maybe they pivot to Jimmy Butler, but Brian Windhorst said that Jimmy Butler doesn't even want to sign an extension with the Warriors, right? So then that means that they're probably not getting Butler either. So, what do you do if you're a team like them? Because like if you're the Suns and the Warriors, right? Like, those are teams that in theory you don't want to be left in the dust if you're them, especially if you're the Suns, because you don't have a future anyways. So, like, in theory, you should be making, some moves. But for the Suns, it could just end up being like you move Nurkic, bring in somebody else, and then you just have Beal as a backup. It's like, okay, they're winning games, I guess, more so now, but that doesn't really change a whole lot. And then for the Warriors, like, maybe you just get Vucevic. I don't know. So I'm kind of confused as to what the thought process is for some of this. But, there are some other teams where it feels like, like, say, the Bucks. Apparently, they were interested in getting, like, Zach LaVine. So you have to cross him off the list because now he's not going anywhere, right? Like, the Kings just swooped in and were like, we'll take LaVine. So they did that. And so now who's left? I think that's kind of the main question. I guess Butler's the main guy left, but, like, where does he go? At this point, because
Right.
a lot of people have kind of now been sort of, kind of trying to say that he might not go to Phoenix at this point because, Miami still doesn't want Beal, understandable. And that's what the Suns are going to try to do. So, like, if that's the case, you know, Jimmy, where are you going?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Apparently, I know people have been talking about Philly. I don't buy that one. I mean, it would be kind of cool to see, an Embiid Jimmy Butler reunion, especially considering, the level of play Embiid had last season. But that's the tough part because it seems like Jimmy Butler has a clear list, and teams
Mhm.
also are being very vocal that they do or don't want him. Like Memphis is a no-fly zone apparently. Now the Warriors are a no-fly zone. So it is kind of interesting how picky this has become, but I don't know where he goes to be honest, and I really don't know where he fits really realistically cuz you're going to have to give something up. And what does Miami want in return? That's my number one question, you know?
Yeah, it's just odd because it feels like because it's to me it seems like you have to move on from Jimmy if you're the Heat
Agreed.
because like there's no point in him being here anymore. And they're 4-6 in their last 10, but at least like now seems like Bam he's playing better. You
Mhm.
got Khalil Ware playing amazing, right?
Mhm.
Tyler Hero's now an All Star,
Mhm.
so at least it feels like there's a little bit more there. And then you replace Jimmy. Like say if they moved him to Golden State and you got back, I don't know, like a Wiggins and then whatever else pieces, like,
That's solid.
obviously that's not a contender or anything, but like that's a solid mix, of
Be better
guys,
than not
where it's like,
having him.
yeah, it's better. Yeah, exactly. It's better than just having a $50 million guy just not playing at all. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
I just can't imagine that, after all that, they still don't move him. It's just a matter of where and like I keep going back to like Memphis, like he doesn't want to go there. I don't know how he really goes to the Bucks unless people have mentioned like, oh, swap him with like Chris Middleton and other pieces. I just
Would
you
Miami
know
budge on that? Because they're not budging on Beal. So
right. So like that's the part where I just don't know, and like Middleton's contract's nowhere near as bad as Beal's. It's not as much money. And I think it's the same length. It's just not as much money. And obviously he doesn't have a no trade clause. But it's just that's kind of the piece where I'm wondering. And it's like it's funny because we kind of felt like not that it would be an uneventful deadline, but like we kind of felt like there wouldn't be really too many surprises, right? Like I think because we had heard about Fox, so we assumed he was getting moved. And even
mhm.
then, like some of this deal is a surprise. And then the Butler thing, we thought that, and then that would just be it. But now, you have the Luca AD thing, and apparently, more trades from other teams could be on the way because now people feel like this is wide open. Even though you still have OKC sitting at the top of the West. And Boston now has been playing better recently. They've won 7 of their last 10. So I, I I don't know. I mean, I legitimately don't know where Jimmy Butler goes at this point because I was thinking for a while. It seemed like he was trying to angle towards going to the Suns, but the Heat seem like they don't want him. They don't want to get Beal back. Then maybe it was Golden State, but apparently now he doesn't want to go there, even though it was supposedly on his list initially. So what's going on here? What am I missing?
Yeah,
What am I
I don't know.
missing?
There's something going on, like you said, but I don't know. I I really wish this would end as well because I'm kind of getting sick and tired of talking about it. But holy crap, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, either way, again, the trade deadline, we're only a few days away now. It's going to be on Thursday. So my only question is what else really happens at this point?
Right.
I mean, in terms of like news rumors, not really a whole lot to talk about, mainly just because most of what we've been talking about is the news rumors,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, according to the Athletic, it's kind of the obvious thing where like, yeah, Luka's probably going to sign the extension with LA. That's not really a shocker, I don't think, right? Of course, all the other stuff kind of talked about the idea of, they're probably not done. They're probably going to do other stuff. But in terms of some other players, if teams have mentioned like, Gorshan Yabusele, right? Teams could be interested in him. Does that mean Philly might sell on some of these guys? I mean, he doesn't make much money. It's a minimum,
Mm-hmm.
right? And he could be a guy that could be a valuable piece of a player rotation because he's played very well for the
Yeah.
Sixers this year, especially with Embiid being out and not really playing a whole lot, right? I think you're getting a ton of value out of that.
Mm-hmm.
Caleb Martin, maybe he's on the move. So that's kind of a thing. Like maybe the Sixers, I mean, they're not going to sell completely because obviously, like, if their pick could go to Oklahoma City, but I could see like them kind of swapping some of these guys, and maybe doing something because it'd be hard to just do nothing and just kind of sit back and watch your team lose games.
Right. Right.
But just are there? I mean, at this point, we can't say don't expect any more surprises because I think we've been surprised enough. But I mean, like, what else could happen? I mean, should we be prepared for like a Giannis trade or,
Right. Right.
a crazy thing? I'm not saying he's going to, but I'm just saying like, should there be things that we're not expecting to go on?
I
Or
mean,
like, is this I mean, this I think is the peak. It's
yeah.
just a matter of, like what else could happen. Even if nothing else happens, this was the craziest deadline I can really think of in a very long time, you
Yeah,
know?
I agree. I mean, like the things that I have my eye on would definitely be what does Dallas do to improve?
Mhm.
What does LA do to improve as well? I think those are top two on my list. I guess
Mhm.
Jimmy Butler is there as well. I think Beal is a good situation to monitor as well. Um, and yeah, I mean, expect the unexpected. I don't know. That's all I can really say is like, yeah, if somebody comes to you with a crazy trade idea or a Photoshop,
Yep.
yeah, don't discount it anymore, I guess, because I
No.
think that's the age and day that we're living in, where yeah, Giannis could be traded to wherever, I guess, at this point, like you said. So it's crazy.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty much it for today's episode of Off Ball Takes. Again, we thank everybody who showed up to our live stream the other day, reacting to the Luca AD trade as it happened. And of course, we appreciate all the comments in there, right? Because it makes for a much more fun, much more interactive stream. Continue to like, comment, and subscribe. If you leave a comment, we'll read it at the end of the video. And then obviously, if you like and subscribe, it helps out the channel. Thanks for all the support, and we'll see you in the next episode.